right. Well, welcome everybody tonight to this week's mental health webinar. We are so excited to have Dr. Sydney Schleiden with us. How's that sound, Dr. Schleiden? The doctor.
Great.
She works with teenagers out in Dallas, and I'll let her explain a little bit more about what exactly she does. But she's going to be working with us and teaching us tonight about working with teens and adolescents who may be struggling either mentally, emotionally, or relationally, and kind of giving us some tips on how we can best help them. So I'm really excited. Thanks so much, Sydney, for being here, and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I have worked with teenagers for the majority of my professional career. And so specifically with more youth who really struggle, have a lot of behavior problems and unhelpful responses. And so I have more of like the extreme side of working with teenagers, and at the same time, they are incarcerated. They're, just your average teenager in a difficult situation. And so a lot of my information is based on, experiences that have helped me, modalities that I use, and things that I've learned along the way. So if you have questions, let me know. Some of the information, I wanted to add a couple things, and given the fact that I do work with teenagers and got trapped at work longer than I anticipated, I didn't get to add those things. So if there's anything you felt like is missing, you have questions, please ask and I'll try my best to answer, or at least point you in a resource. So we will talk about, I'm going to move this thing over so I can see better, but we will talk about meeting teens where they are. And I think we'll kind of talk about our language. So it made me laugh just talking about defiant and struggling teenagers. I call teenagers defiant all the time. They're struggling. They are manipulative. They are all those words, right? And I use those words, just not to them. And I try not to use it at work with the people that I work with so that they can learn a kind of different language. And so I just wanted to take a second to talk about even how we talk about teenagers. And so I would talk about reframing our language. And so teens may be struggling and defiant. And it's important that we reframe this when we're talking to them, especially because if I called one of my, kids defiant, of course, they're going to want to be defiant just to spite me. That's just because I'm a teenager and I'm trying to be independent. And so why not? And so just thinking about how we can even talk about teens to take off some of the struggling that's going on. So teens may have unhelpful responses. And so we might normally say they're struggling, have behavior problems, throwing tantrums. Again, all those things are true. And we like to use the language of unhelpful responses. You learned this. This isn't helping you get your needs met. And it's a response. And so teens also may feel misunderstood, or we might say defiant, but we can reframe that as, it must be really difficult to be in your situation. I imagine you feel misunderstood. I feel like every teenager has that like angsty kind of misunderstoodness about them. That's what makes them so fun. So teens are also, if we just think about everything they do, is trying to get a need met. So if they are sneaking out and, being defiant in those ways, there's something that they, want. Maybe it's peer acceptance. Maybe it's control over their own life. Maybe it's attention from someone. They have a need and they're trying to get it met. Well, if my kid's sneaking out and I'm be like, that manipulative little kid, like how dare they? But it's just important to remember, why are they doing the things that they're doing? What's causing them to have an unhelpful response? Just earlier today, there was kids got like a bag of snacks, right? And they're excited. They get snacks. I'm hungry. And they're like, can we have the whole bag? And they're like, no, you're about to go to lunch. You can have 2. And they're arguing over snacks, right? Why can't I have more? Why can't I have more? And can I have my juice? Does my juice count as a snack, or is it food that counts as a snack? And it would be easy to say that's manipulative, right? You're trying to get your way. And they are, but they're trying to meet a need, right? So it seems like you're really hungry. I wonder if you could ask, I wonder if you notice how you're coming across. I wonder how you could ask things, but just trying to understand like what that need is instead of just automatically labeling it. Because I was irritated in the conversation. And if I was like, y'all are being manipulative, they would all be like, I'll show you manipulative, And so it's just being able to like understand them and know that we've all been there and we can all be manipulative. We can all struggle, be defiant in our own ways. And so finding ways to meet them and using language that is supportive to their needs is the first step on getting on their level. And so, again, I might not want to use manipulative to them, but if I can say, hey, it sounds like this snack is really important to you. Let's like figure it out in a way that's still fair, not always giving you what you want, but meeting their need. So just a little starter of how we can even be on their same playing field, because teenagers have a lot going on. So just talking about mental health, first, some common adolescent diagnoses are ADHD, ODD, conduct disorder. We'll go through these in more detail. So these are some of the ones that I've most commonly worked with. So we'll talk about some of the behaviors and some of the strategies. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the behaviors are impulsiveness, hyperactivity, inattention. Also, that's like so many teenagers. So just because your teenager has, these things that they're exhibiting doesn't mean that they have ADD. And some strategies is they thrive really well in structure, giving praise to them and reminders of appropriate behaviors and responses. So instead of kind of getting onto them, it's redirecting them to the appropriate response. Conduct disorder, and the specific line of work that I do, conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, which we'll get to, are probably on every single kid's, list of diagnoses. So it comes across almost every kid I work with. And you can imagine that that's likely not true. It's maybe a little overdiagnosed. And they meet the criteria given their experiences. So with conduct disorder, there's a serious violation of rules, a lack of empathy, and they misinterpret others' intentions and struggle with some aggression. Strategies: focus on strengths, encourage positive interactions. So if I'm constantly pointing out how you're aggressive or you're breaking the rules, like that doesn't help you change those behaviors. So instead, encourage teenagers with or without conduct disorder that, hey, I noticed that you were just so respectful to your teacher. That's awesome. Like, I loved the way that you interacted with them. They might be like, okay, you're weird, but they're really going to be able to soak that in and focusing on their strengths. Again, it's not that we're ignoring the fact, let's say a kid, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like maybe a kid has a tantrum and then comes back and makes a repair. So they blow up, they throw this big fit, or have an unhelpful response to a situation, and then they come back and they're like, I messed up, I'm so sorry. There's consequences, right, for blowing up on someone. And if I really focus on the strength of that, like, wow, it's so brave of you to come forward and own up to your mistakes, I'm really proud of that. Like, praising those things reinforces that positive behavior in kids. Oppositional defiant disorder, similar to conduct disorder, it's displays of anger and resentment. They're argumentative, have a refusal to comply, and they're easily irritated. So they meet some of these criteria. Also, again, if you think about just picking any teenager off the street, go to a classroom, lots of teenagers have this at some time. They are learning how to be independent. And so sometimes that's going to make them angry. Sometimes they're going to argue. Sometimes they're going to try to go against the grain to figure out who they are. And so just because your kid is doing these things, or you're working with a kid who's doing these things, doesn't mean they have ODD. It's very normal for a kid to explore. So strategies: respond without anger. So this kid's doing, as we would say, doing the most, like getting in arguments, cussing out teachers. You tell them, hey, I need you to sit down. No, I'm not going to sit down. Like, that makes you want to pull your hair out. So the best thing you can do, though, is respond without anger. Okay, I understand that you don't want to sit down, and I still need you to follow the rules. You're sitting in my class, or I need you to get in the car because we're going somewhere, if you're a parent. Just being calm, as difficult as that can be. I'm certainly not perfect at it. And then being clear and consistent, and having natural and appropriate consequences. Natural consequences, as most people know, are the best and most effective consequences for teenagers, and they need to be appropriate. So if I'm out 5 minutes past my curfew, I shouldn't be grounded until I'm 16. I shouldn't be grounded until I'm 18, right? Maybe I need to stay home for 2 weeks. Maybe I need to talk to my parents or my counselor about why that 5 minutes made such a big deal, and have like an assignment. I'm all about like kids learning. I think we punish without teaching. And so I think there's a lot of things to be said about kids understanding how their actions, where they went wrong, how they impacted others, how they impact themselves. And so making sure the consequences are appropriate and fitting for the situation. And then, yes, I'd be clear and consistent. Just make sure you're always, again, with any teenager, any person, we need clear communication and consistency. So good days, bad days, angry, happy, mad, sad, whatever, I show up to my kids and work consistently. If you break the rules, there's consequence. And I don't change that day to day. Like, oh, I'm too tired to hold this consequence to you, because then they're like, oh, I can get a little something. I'm going to try and do that again. So even when it's exhausting on your part, on the front hand of having consequences that are appropriate, it's important to be consistent with them, because if kids get an inch, they'll take a mile, just because they're just trying to test boundaries. And so it's super important, again, not just with kids with oppositional defiant disorder, but with all kids, to have boundaries as well. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, developmentally inappropriate outbursts. So this would be like a 16-year-old throwing a 2-year-old tantrum. Persistent anger and irritability. Strategies include anticipate triggers. So you should know, when you go to third period and you see your English teacher, that's a trigger. You should be having conversations about that, be mindful of that, so that you can prepare the youth or the child for those things, the teenager for those things. Sorry, at work we call them youth, so I'm like switching all my language to fit. So I think, again, consistency and encouraging positive behavior. So essentially all these things talk about the same strategies, which is be consistent, encourage positivity, be available to these kids as they're struggling with probably very frustrating things. If my kid's constantly punching someone, I'm going to want to have really lay down the law, have these consequences, yell at them. And there's a balance, right? Me yelling at them, they're not going to listen. So how can I make sure the message is clear, have boundaries, make sure they know it's not appropriate, and remain calm and effective. Major depressive disorder. So behaviors, loss of interest in activities, worthlessness, and suicidality. I wanted to have a whole slide on self-harm and suicidality. I didn't get around to it, so I'll kind of touch on it here. It's just really important, we can't know everything, and it's important to, if you're a mental health professional, to assess for suicidality and self-harm, as the rates in teenagers is very high. And so it's important to ask those questions, be direct, make sure that you're clear in what you're asking and you're not like beating around the bush. And then if you're a family member or a loved one, there's actually a man in Lubbock who did a presentation. I think he does it every year. I'll get back to you on that, but on suicidality and self-harm and for families and looking at signs and stuff. So I need to find that resource and send it to you, Danny, but it's a really great one. But basically it's just be mindful of, how their behaviors change. Again, if I'm a teenage boy and my girlfriend breaks up with me, or I'm wrestling with like my sexual identity or whatever it might be, my feelings of worthlessness, or if I'm suicidal, that might come across, or if I'm depressed, as angry. I might be punching walls and punching people and yelling at everyone. So it doesn't come off as depressed, it comes off as angry. And really, I might be struggling with some depression and suicidality. So again, teenagers can also just be angry and moody. So it's just paying really close attention to them. If you're a parent, knowing your teenager, having conversations, over communicating, it drives them nuts, but you know what's going on. And then if you're a mental health professional, obviously looking for all the things that you know to look for, and knowing that it appears differently in gender and just in different children in general. And then if I'm a teenage girl and something happens, same thing. I might show it in anger. But most of the kids that I particularly work with, you're not going to really see them sad a lot, although they are very sad and often diagnosed with major depressive disorder. But it more comes out in anger because that's more socially acceptable for them. So it's easy to just write them off as an angry kid, and really they might be struggling with some depression. So just being mindful of the signs, knowing your kid, knowing the teens that you work with. Are there changes in their diet, their sleep, their hygiene, their activities, all those things, paying attention to that. And then strategies for major depressive disorder, again, or for any teenager: physical activity, recommended sleep, identify activities that they enjoy, and then be patient. Again, not just for major depressive disorder, but these kids, or every kid, needs a lot of patience. Teenagers are my favorite people on the planet, and they're also very difficult because they're exploring, and so they're doing everything they can to push away in some ways. And so you might need a lot of patience. You will need a lot of patience and support. And so just remembering that when it's difficult. Another one would be post-traumatic stress disorder. So behaviors: difficulty sleeping, detachment, nightmares and flashbacks, impulsive and aggressive, and increased fear and worry. And then obviously it'd be helpful for them to see a therapist, help them regulate their emotions, and have positive relationships. And so again, with the particular youth that I work with, this comes up a lot. And so it's just important to be mindful that depending on, what the reason is for watching this or tuning in tonight, you're going to come across a lot of teenagers that have different experiences, whether it's the loss of a loved one, maybe family violence, or some form of abuse. There's a lot of different things that can obviously cause PTSD. And so, again, I could say if I'm a teacher and a kid's sleeping in my class, I'm like, something just clicked in my brain. Sorry, but if I'm a teacher and a kid sleeping in my class, I might think that they're uninterested, unmotivated, but you don't know their whole history. And so it's important to not always assume that like first negative thought, because I think as adults, and I'll only speak for myself, I can be guilty of being like, why can't you just do this? Why can't you figure it out? Like, life is not this hard. But one, teenagers' brains are not fully developed, and especially that prefrontal cortex. And so they don't have the same decision-making skills that we do. And so what is really rational and makes sense to me does not make sense to a lot of us, or does not make sense to teenagers. And so remembering that, thinking about that, they're not just being difficult and defiant, their brain's developing, they're going through things, just honestly, like giving teenagers the benefit of the doubt. We can all remember, if we think back, maybe you had like the best teenage years ever. Yeah, even if you did, there are hard things, and so just taking a step back out of your adult mind and remembering what it's like to be in that place can be one of the most therapeutic things, and one of the best things that you can do. Teenagers tell me all the time, like, you don't get it, you're not a teenager. Right, but I was one, and I remember, and I wouldn't want to go back. And I don't know how hard it is today with social media and all the other things that they have going on. But it's easy for them to discount adults because they're not struggling in the moment with them. And if you do the work of remembering what it's like to have those feelings, it can take you a long way. So there was something else that I wanted to talk about. Oh, well, I'll give book recommendations at the end, but if I forget, because I didn't get to add that slide in, if you haven't read the book Brainstorm, I forget like the side title of it, but it's about the teenage brain and how it develops. He goes through, Dan Siegel goes through examples of just the teenage brain, and it's fascinating because you remember it, like making impulsive decisions and not thinking it through, and him talking about it in the brain science way really helped remind me where my kids are at. So just a small little side story is, sorry, it says my computer's about to restart. Let me hit snooze on this. Okay, don't know what that was about. Little side story, I worked with a boy who was is absolutely wonderful, and he was in a facility in residential drug treatment, and they essentially watched a rated R movie that they weren't supposed to watch, and he was like an honors level kid, like doing really great, about to go home, and they watched this movie, and it was an adult who allowed them to do it, but the facility, the people were mad at the kid for not standing up and having integrity and saying we shouldn't watch this, as an honors level. And that's great. Like, I hope someday, I have a kid who has that level of integrity. And my brain thinks, as a teenager, my brain thinks reward over consequence. So it might be, hey, if I get caught, we're going to get in trouble. The adult might get in trouble. And the reward is so much bigger to a teenager that even though I know the consequence, I don't actually consider it the same way that I consider the reward. And so he said, like, oh, I knew, we talked about it. I knew we might have gotten in trouble. He actually ended up, having some loyalty to a fault for the adult in the situation and didn't want the adult to get in trouble. And people were mad at him for that too. You should tell on the adult, you should. And he was like, this man, has supported me. So just the power of a positive relationship, although in that situation was not great. But, kids have this desire to protect people. They really care about connection to people, and that can be taken for granted. But he was unwilling to, he stood by what he did. He's like, I knew that I could get caught. We got caught, and we got to watch a cool movie. So it's not that serious. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And even when we had the conversation, I had to remember, like, I want you to have integrity. And he's like, I do. And an adult told me this was okay, so it should be okay. It's like, well, anyway, I could go on a whole long tangent about it. I digress. But essentially just knowing where their brains are at. So if you read Brainstorm by Dan Siegel, it's great. Recommend it to anyone who has a teenager, works with teenagers. It'll help you a lot. So the brain science I wanted to talk about, and then also one other thing. It'll come back to me as we go forward. Does anyone, are there any questions before we move on to how a family can support their teen? We're going to talk about Dan Siegel again. So, okay. So the 4 S's, Dan Siegel also has a book, The Power of Showing Up. Again, I highly encourage it. He talks a lot about attachment and the power of attachment. Attachment theory, what it can do for a teenager, a kid, how it impacts them. So, I specifically work with the kids who have a lot of broken attachments, insecure attachments. And even though I'm not their parent or their caregiver, I can create a healthy attachment with them that they can carry with them for the rest of their lives. And I can't do a lot sometimes given the circumstances of the youth that I work with, but I can do that. That's one thing that I always go back to and remind myself of, is I can be a positive, secure attachment, even if I'm just one. And I, have kids call me after they leave my facility and talk about just being thankful for relationships. So I know that it works. And there's science behind it, so that people love that. Anyway, so Dan Siegel talks about the 4 S's in order to create a secure attachment. So this is geared towards parents, but if you're a mental health professional, a teacher, anybody, it works. So the first S is safe. Make teens feel safe by the way you respond to them, and repair the relationship when there is a breach. So we all know what it's like when you have that person in your life who just feels safe. Like, I know I can talk to them, I can trust them. And so it's showing up and being that person for a teenager. So when they say, I don't know, something that they could get in trouble for. I tried alcohol, let's just say. And obviously a teenager should not be drinking alcohol. But if you sit there and you did what? And scream at them and this whole thing happened, are they ever going to tell you that again? No. So remembering that how you respond to them is going to create a space for if they're going to tell you things. There's a way to respond without saying that's okay, and also saying, like, thank you for letting me know. Let's talk about that. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has like memories of, their parents, if I think back to maybe not handling certain situations the best. And so just remembering to be a safe person for these kids. And then if you mess up, because we do, I have, as a therapist, said unhelpful things to kids. And I just show up and say, I'm sorry, I messed up. That's not okay. There's no excuse. I'm responsible, and I'll do better next time. Teenagers don't get apologized to a lot in my experience, because people think like, I'm the adult, or I'm the person in charge. I have power. I'm whatever it is, the power dynamic. A teenager is usually pretty low on the totem pole. And so them getting an apology is a pretty big deal. And so, if you're going to be at their basketball game and then you can't, apologizing, letting them know you wish you could be there and you had something come up. Don't just say like, oh, I'll be at your next one, no big deal. it is a big deal. And so you can create safety by doing some of these things. The next one would be seen. So creating a space to have conversations about the teen and their needs. So beyond like the important, parent talk or teacher talk or whatever it is, therapist talk, like who are you and what do you like? And, being interested about them. Teenagers are fascinating. Like they have such creative minds and they have so much to offer, and they're often dismissed because of their age. And so being a person who really shows them interest can be really, really impactful, and it shows them that they matter. I'm seen, I'm important, I'm valuable, I have something to offer. Soothe, so offer your presence, engagement, affection, calm, and empathy, and help them develop tools to calm down. So, people talk about self-soothing a lot. I think it's, there's a lot of controversy around the topic for some reason. But anyway, I don't know I wasn't born knowing how to calm myself down, regulate my emotions, be soothed. Someone had to show up, sit with me, help me breathe, teach me to count backwards from 376 by fours, whatever it is that works. I didn't just know those things. I learned them through someone being there with me. And sometimes we can look at teenagers and be like, you're 16. You should know how to figure it out. I'm here to be a witness to, I don't know many teenagers who know how to calm themselves down because they haven't had someone help them calm down. And so if you're there, just your presence alone can help. And then later you can help them develop tools. And all of these things are meant to happen. So safe, seen, and soothe work together to create a secure attachment, according to Dan Siegel. And I, owe him a lot of credit because I do this and it helps. And so when we create a secure base, we create a secure base when we do these things consistently. So you can't be safe one day and not the next, right? So I got to be safe, seen, and I got to be safe, make sure they're seen, and soothe them consistently. And so that they will then learn how to do that for themselves. So we're teaching them how to be safe, to see themselves as worthy, and to soothe themselves when things go wrong. That's kind of his whole goal. Read his book. He's great. I think it's really helpful. So the 8 goals of adolescent misbehavior, this was developed from a book called Parenting Teenagers. And so some of what they said are there's these 8 goals of misbehavior for adolescents, and it's excitement, comfort, escape, attention, power, helplessness, revenge, and peer acceptance. And teenagers are essentially, sometimes like if I'm sneaking out, I might be looking for peer acceptance and excitement and escape and attention. So there's typically one that stands out more than the others. But this is kind of what teens want. So if I come downstairs and I'm like wearing something my parents don't want me to wear, I'm probably trying to get attention. Or if I'm, let's say I like take something of my parents without asking, I steal the car, I'm going to take the car out for a joyride. I don't know. That could be power. Like I want the power in relationship. At the end of the day, the one thing in my experience of working with teenagers is a defiant teenager will always win. Like if I tell you to sit down and you're not going to sit down, I can't force you. So me digging my feet in and you will sit down and you will listen to me and you will respect me, probably not. At the end of the day, I can continue to be defiant and respond to you this way. And I'm probably getting a little like power out of it, or revenge, or what, excitement. So there's no need to kind of fight power with power. And so you have to find ways to not feed into it. So if your teenager comes downstairs with blue hair, they're looking for a response, right? Like if they weren't supposed to do it, maybe you want your teen to have blue hair, that's a different thing. But they're probably looking for a response. And so to say, why is your hair blue? You know you're not supposed to have your hair. We're going to dinner with so-and-so. That's not helpful. If you're like, okay, and you just completely ignore it. Don't forget we have dinner at 6 with these people. They're going to be like, did they just ignore my blue hair? And you do that enough and they kind of give up. It gets old, right? Like, I'm not getting what I wanted from the situation. It's really, really hard to do. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. But essentially, remember that adolescents are seeking a sense of belonging. Again, if we think back to, or just being a human, like we all desire to belong with someone. We were built for community, we were created for connection. And so adolescents are really trying to figure that out and find their place in the world. And so they're doing these things, excitement, comfort, escape, to get that belonging. If I'm sneaking out to meet friends, I'm trying to find my crowd, right? If I'm going through a phase where I wear all bright pink, maybe I'm trying to fit in. So just remembering that again, back to that need, they have a desire to belong. So the best thing you can do in response to these misbehavior goals is have positive goals. So we have to teach teens that they can get a sense of belonging from positive behavior, right? You don't have to get in a fight or steal a car or go to a party or dye your hair blue to belong. You can be who you are and find people who are going to love you for who you are. And that matters a whole lot more than doing all these things to fit in. And so parents need to encourage behavior that reflects these positive goals. They need to encourage cooperation and the willingness to participate in a give and take of relationships. So teenagers are kind of egocentric, right? They think the world kind of revolves around them. So it's helping them learn that I should be concerned with others and myself. Like there's interdependence, not just independence, not just kind of that enmeshment of I care so much about others and what they think of me. It's the in-between. I'm who I am and I'm connected to others, and I can get those things in positive ways. So responding to misbehavior, basically respond differently. Think about how your teen wants you to respond to a negative, aggressive, or apathetic behavior and avoid that response. So again, your teen steals your car, takes it out for a joyride, come back home, or sneaks out to a party. Of course, your reaction is to hammer down, lose your mind. What are you doing? And so the other thing, to just respond oppositely, not encourage their behavior, right? But be calm. You made this choice. There are consequences for our choices. You're grounded, whatever it is. But don't get in a power struggle with them arguing back and forth, because that might be what they want. They want you stole my car. Of course I stole your car. Da, 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 da. They want that back and forth. So if you just kind of, the consequences, that's okay. I had a kid today in my office tell me, I really want to go get in a fight. Okay, that makes sense. This person made you mad. And if you get in a fight, then what will happen? Well, I probably will get delayed. I won't go home on time. I might not get my level, right? Is that worth it? Well, I'm really mad at this person, so kind of. Okay, well, that's your choice, right? You know the consequences. If you don't do it, you might be annoyed, but nothing bad's going to happen. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to argue with you and beg you to make the right choice. You get to make it. I don't live with the consequences of your actions. You do. And as a parent, that's much harder. As a therapist, I get kind of a little bit of a pass on it. But I also work to help parents remember teenagers ultimately get to make their decisions. We want to guide them, help them, encourage them, and if my kid really messes up, I need to support them, but with boundaries. That's their choices, and they have to learn to take accountability for their choices with support. So just remember that responding to misbehavior will take time. It actually might get worse before it gets better. So they might try more and more and more to like push those limits of getting your attention or pushing the boundaries. Like, what do I have to do to get them to react the way that I want? So it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. But just hang tough and stick to what you're doing, and they'll eventually give up. And then another little tip and trick is renegotiating parent and adolescent relationships. Sterling Shumway created this, and I teach it to parents a lot. And so it's 10 steps to help parent-adolescent relationships. And he goes through a whole thing about get rid of the grudge. And so we can build a grudge against our child or, a client or a student. And so it's getting rid of that, seeking and finding unconditional love. He talks about metaphorically sending your child away to college. And so, again, like, if I sent them off, how much control would I have of them? I'm probably not going to be able to control everything because they're at college. So send them off and try to respond in the way that you would if they were there. Again, having boundaries, limits, but not like trying to monitor their every way they move like you might a little, 4-year-old. Begin limiting your battlefield. So it's not, every fight's not worth it. Establish a written contract. So we do contracts a lot in therapy. When I get home, I'll have to earn my phone back. I need to do these things. Oh, you signed this contract, right? I'm not going to argue with you about it. So you said you were going to do this. You didn't do it. You don't get your phone back. Or you did it. Congratulations. You get your phone back. Let consequences do the work. Parents, like, grounding a kid for 2 weeks is work on you, right? And probably appropriate. If I ground my kid for 6 months, I'm probably not going to be able to stick true to that because that's so long and that's so much work on me. So make sure you're willing to do the whole consequence or they're going to try to get over on you, Same thing, block reaction seeking and goal getting behavior. So they're trying to get your attention, and gently remind them how to get your attention in a positive way. Be consistent, hold the line, don't control the line. So have a boundary and recognize you can't control everything. So I lock my door at 10 p.m. If you're not home at 10 p.m., I guess you're not coming home, right? I'm not going to go out searching for you, hunting you down, whatever. You're not going to be home. Maybe I'll call a parent to make sure you're safe. And at the end of the day, I can't control everything. I keep saying my computer is going to restart, so I apologize if it does for some reason. And then seek support. Parenting is hard. Teenagers are difficult. Again, they're my favorite, people on this planet. And they can be really exhausting. And so you can't do this alone as a therapist, as a teacher, as a parent, as an aunt. They really can take it out of you because they're going through a lot. And so they're trying to figure things out and they're pushing you to figure things out. So get some support. Helpful interventions that I specifically use. We use DBT at the facility that I work at. So meditation and mindfulness is the foundation of that. It teaches teens skills related to interpersonal effectiveness, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance. All things we could all benefit from. As a systemic therapist, it's not systemic and it's evidence-based, and it's really helpful having kids learn skills that they can use if they practice and practice and practice, and they become automatic. That's helpful, especially meditation and mindfulness. Aggression replacement training. I'm trained in that, which is essentially getting rid of aggression, but it has 3 components. Anger control, so it teaches kids about triggers and body cues, and goes through a cycle that gives them skill streaming, which is kind of like social skills that you can teach them, and then moral reasoning so they can recognize their thinking errors, right? We talked today in a training about teenagers breaking up, like, and all the boys are like, oh, I would just push the girl away and like not really talk to her, flirt with someone else. Well, that's not really nice. And the girls are like, I would just say to his dad, send him a text, right? Well, also not the best, right? So helping them get those moral reasoning skills to think things through, and having the most like mature, appropriate response. So aggression replacement is really helpful, and then attachment-based therapy. Attachment theory is my favorite theory. So building healthy relationships, utilizing the 4 S's that we talked about, just being a healthy, consistent adult is the best thing you can do. A healthy, consistent person, no matter what role you are for this teenager, is really, really important and effective. And then remember, teens are fun and creative. I just watched a bunch of girls give like this really great talent show, and it's always helpful for me to remember like they have so much to offer. They're so creative. They can draw and sing and dance and do magic tricks and all the things, and they're so creative and so smart. They just need a little nudge in how to use that in the right way, and we are lucky enough, whoever you are, if you're here, then you care about that. We're lucky enough to get to help them do that. Remember that they want to be loved and understood. I put understand because I don't know why, but understood. Who doesn't want to be loved and understood? So making sure that they feel that way. And they're developing a sense of independence or interdependence. And so all these things kind of going together creates an angsty teenager that might have some unhelpful responses and probably needs a lot of love and support. Any questions? It's completely okay if you don't have questions.
We might not tonight, Sid, but
No, that's okay.
thank you so much. This was really helpful for me because I work with a lot of teens, and I'm like, this was good. I needed to hear this. So.
I'm so glad. Happy to help.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Thank you all for coming this week. Next week, we'll be hearing from Emily Janes. She is a therapist here in Texas as well. She's going to be talking to us about helping little kids with big emotions. And so we are going to hear from her about that next week, and it's going to be great. Thank you again, Sid, for coming and helping us, and really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a good week.